Hello there and welcome back to The Closet Historian and back to my studio for another project. Now, I had many requests after wearing this necklace recently to go ahead and show you how I made it, which of course the problem is I didn't make this necklace. In fact, I think I've had it since I was about 10 or 11 years old, and I've seen many of these for sale over the years. You see this pattern pop up or this necklace pop up. I think Lady Mary wore it on Downton Abbey one time. So many versions and iterations of this necklace are floating around on the internet. You can find them for sale because some people who have a lot more patience have made more than one of these, because now that I've tried it, I know why they're so expensive. But that does mean there are many patterns for similar necklaces to this one floating around on the internet, and I will be referencing a couple of those today. I will also include information on the materials you need to make something like this in the description below. This isn't actually a very inexpensive project because it does take quite a lot of beads, and I used Czech glass beads for my project today. I've seen some of these made with crystal beads instead, which definitely seems to work quite well, and you can find those at like a Joann's or Michael's. But this particular shape of bead is like the classic round shape that, or like for this necklace at least, is the classic round shape from Czech glass bead manufacturers, which is not necessarily perfectly round. It's almost a little bit more of an oval shape, and that's what this necklace is made with. So I wanted to go ahead and copy this as best I could. And in the end, the material you need most of all to go ahead and make something like this is patience, as I quickly found out. But of course, with so many requests to show how I made this necklace, I decided that even though I hadn't made it, I would go ahead and figure out how, so I could show you how to make one as well. But again, gear up for this one. It's a bit of a doozy. Let's go ahead and dive on in. So before we can make the necklace, we have to make the 5 main motifs for the necklace, and I've made one here to start with. Here's one I prepared earlier. And to make this, I'm going to use size 3, size 4, size 5, and size 6 Czech glass fire polished beads, in addition to some size 11 seed beads. And to weave and string this necklace today, I'll be using this Miyuki beading thread in black. I can go ahead and link this below. I will also be using size 10 beading needles. I get a lot of questions about beading needles, but these are just Beadalon size 10 beading needles. These are not very expensive. I just pick these up at the craft store. I try and keep some in like back stock because I do so much sequining and beadwork on clothes that I use these for as well. So I tend to have quite a few of these laying around because I do bend them rather fast, and once they get too bent out of shape, I do just sort of retire them. But I will go ahead and cut a good like 3-foot long piece of my nylon thread here, and I will thread each end onto its own needle to begin this little motif here, this sort of double teardrop shape, and we'll be starting with the bottom teardrop, which is a little bit larger. And to begin, I will be threading on 4 size 3 fire polish beads from up here onto one needle like so. Thread those down to the center of my string, and then I'll take the last bead and feed the other needle through it as well, sort of to lock the other 3 in place, like so. This is the technique we'll be using to weave all of this together today. So it's a lot of string one bead on one side, string one bead on the other side, slip those down, and then lock them with a third. So here I'm stringing on 2 size 3s, and I'll be locking that again with another size 3. The colorway for the beads I'll be using today is called Green Iris. It's probably a black bead underneath all of this, and then it has a sort of iridescent greenish tinged coating on the outside of this. The other necklace that I've had for ages since I was a kid is an iridescent, like purpley blue sort of finish, iris finish on a black bead. So I still need to make one of these that is just purely jet black as well. And for the next set here, I'm starting to move through the pattern and adding on size 4s and then size 5 all the way up to size 6s in the center. This is the pattern I'm using here. This is my version of it. Again, this pattern is floating everywhere. I will link to the Preciosa project below because it has a really good detailed instructions for this. I find this almost like knitting in the sense that I find it quite difficult to follow patterns for beadwork. It's the same way I get with knitting, where I lose my place so quickly and I think, oh, did I use size 4s or do I need to use size 5s for this next row? I just get out of whack so fast, so I have to really concentrate when I'm doing this. So this necklace did take me about 3 days in total to make, just because I had to, unpick certain parts of it where I had done a row of 4s where I needed a row of 3s and things like that. So it does get confusing for someone like me very quickly. But if you're used to reading beading patterns, if you're used to reading knitting or crochet patterns, I think you would have an easier time with this than I do. And here you can see I am counting to make sure I'm not losing my place. But we need one more row of 3s here. Lock those in place with another 3. And here I have completed the first side of the lower drop here. So I'm going to weave my threads through so they both come out on this side of this little last bead here, so we can go up the other side, repeating everything I just did on the first side over here. You lock the last set of 3s on this side of the teardrop by stringing through one of the size 3 beads that you started with on the other side. So hopefully this makes any sense. Again, if it doesn't, I'm with you. This was actually kind of a challenging project for me. I would love to make more of these because I love the resulting necklace, but I do have to really concentrate. So it's not necessarily relaxing. It's meditative, but not necessarily relaxing. And it actually is kind of difficult to find size 5 fire polished beads, which is kind of annoying. I can find, certain colors, but there's a lot more, like a lot wider color range for other sizes. And the size 5 seem to be on the rarer side, which is unfortunate. And once I have finished off my first teardrop, I have to go back down through and thread on 4 seed beads per side. They go between the 4s and the 5s. You can see here, if you're looking at the pattern on the right-hand side of the screen, the center 3 largest beads in the middle of the sort of eye shape we have here. You don't put seed beads in between those, but you do lock the last few sets of 4s in place with some seed beads just going around the inside of the ring with one of the threads. And this really helps secure the shape down. Once you pull this thread taut, it really secures this little shape in place because it can be kind of floopy before then. Then I feed my needles back through one of the top size 3s here on one side, so then I can start beading the top loop of this motif, for lack of a better word. And once again, I'm really studying my necklace that I have. I'm studying the Preciosa pattern. I'm studying other necklaces. I have just like tabs open of this necklace so that I can see it in different colors, and it might help me understand what's going on a little bit better. Up here in the top, instead of using the same size on each needle and then locking it with a new bead, you're using size 3s on the inside ring of the circle and then progressively larger beads on the outside ring of the circle. So you start with a size 3 beads, you switch on the outside of the circle to size 4s, then 2 size 5s, finish at the top with 1 size 6, and locking as you go around. But the inside of this ring always has size 3s, which is what makes the ring so circular and like kind of close in on itself, I suppose. You can use different shapes and sizes of beads and use the same technique. It's just going to come out differently. So if you used beads that are a little bit more round, if you use beads that are oval in the other way, where they're like wider in the middle as opposed to stretched out in the middle like these are, it's going to give you just slightly different results. Of course, it won't come out exactly the same unless you were using the exact same beads as recommended by Preciosa in the pattern. Of course, they want you to use their beads, which makes sense. I wish I had a really good source for Czech glass beads. If anyone knows of a really good US-based source for like every size and every color, let me know, because even like Fire Mountain Gems, they don't have all the colors. I've almost found like eBay seems to have it, but like every time I find a store that has one of the colors I need, it's like they have the size 6s, but not the size 4s. If I could get every size from one store, but I had to source from, I think, 3 different bead shops online to get the beads for this project, just because not everyone had the same colors and sizes. Like no one has the full color range and the full size range. So if you know of a shop that has a full range of Czech, let me know. But I've finished my top loop now, and again, I need to lock that down into place using seed beads. If you look at the pattern here on the right, once again, you can see the like cobalt blue kind of color on the inside of the ring. That's where these seed beads need to go, in between those size 3s on the inside ring. And then the top of this, again, it just goes through 3 without seed beads. Again, reference the patterns to be able to see what I'm talking about. On this colorful illustration we have going on here, the 2 cyan beads in the center, those are the beads that are shared between the bottom loop, like that were the starting beads of the bottom loop and become the starting beads of the top loop. So I tried to do this little diagram as accurately as I could. Hopefully it's correct, just because I got lost so quickly that I don't know if we should really trust me, honestly. But I did my best. I concentrated. I spent a couple of hours doing little dots in Photoshop yesterday. Hopefully this is correct. But once I come around again with those seed beads, I can go ahead and tie off my thread. And then I like to just weave it back through a couple of beads. I think you're not supposed to do this because like when it comes undone, it's annoying to like have to come in here and trim the thread again. But trimming it right next to the knots just makes me very anxious. So I don't want to do it. I'd rather just weave these back through and have little threads perhaps escape from their bead prison later on. But I'd rather it be the ends and not the knot coming undone. I don't know, just make me nervous. So now I have 4 of these like magic, but I need to make 1 more. So I will go ahead and do that at higher speed here at 300 times speed. Once again, I begin with a 3-foot-ish long piece of thread, a meter-ish for those of you working in metric. I'll start with those 4 size 3 check glass beads, thread back through the first to create this little loop of them. Then each needle gets 1 size 3, locks through another size 3. Then each needle gets a size 4, and they lock through another size 4. That's just how I'm going along here. Again, following the pattern, studying the necklace closely. It was really useful for me to have one of these necklaces finished that I could reference like in person, of course. But if you just look at very high res close-up pictures of one of these, which I will post really large photos of my finished necklace over on my Pinterest and link to those in the description below. So you just want to, like, if you get lost in any place looking at one of these patterns, just look at the necklace itself. This first part is the most difficult part, and then things get a little bit more freeform once you start stringing these motifs together and then doing the flounces later on. You can kind of get a little bit more creative with those and still have it come out like, and it'll still be functional, but you can get a little bit more creative with the design and the finishing of it. And here I just made a mistake. I threaded on too many 5s, so I had to go back. There's only like 1 arc of 5s, so there's only 6 size 5s on each side. Hopefully this makes any sense. Again, this was one of those ones where I had to concentrate quite a lot. And then as soon as, like, I could do one flawlessly off camera, and then as soon as I turned the camera back on, I kept making mistakes. Come on. Why has it got to be like that? I don't know. And to the right side of the screen here, I do have size 5 by 7 millimeter teardrop shaped beads, and I'll be using those later to accent this again and to create the center rounds that you need for this. Again, the full materials list for this will be below. If you want to know exactly the sizes of beads I used and where I got them, all of that will be linked in the description. And here I'm threading through the end of my first row for my bottom teardrop, so I can start using the side of the last little locked quatrefoil as the first bead in my new ring of these, back up to the top. Luckily, you can see what I'm doing because, again, as usual, explaining what you're doing with your hands is not always the easiest thing. It's easier to explain what your brain is doing than explain what your hands are doing sometimes. This does seem a pretty good and gothic project to start off the fall season here, as it is now September. I mean, it's basically fall prep month. August is the prep month for fall prep month, of course. The American retail system agrees with me. Capitalism agrees to start selling Halloween stuff in summer. But the longer Halloween season is, the better, in my opinion. Of course, it's essentially year-round when you're me. And now I'm just feeding my seed beads on here, 4 again for each side of my inner ring here. And this does mean that when I get back up to the top, my threads are different lengths because I've gone around this loop one more time with this. So I use the longer thread to start the next ring. Hopefully that makes sense, so that I have enough thread to do the whole thing. You know, when in doubt, cut your threads a little long. I think a lot of people use fishing line for this sort of thing, but I find that fishing line deteriorates quickly over time, so the plastic becomes brittle and is more likely to just snap or break. So I don't like working with fishing line for beading. And this is the first time I've ever worked with this particular nylon thread, but I really like Miyuki beads, so I figured that their thread must be quite nice as well. And I know a lot of people use this for doing very, very intricate woven beadwork, so I figured if it's good enough for them, it would be good enough for me. And it's nice and thin so that it will go through these beads several times. So if I have to weave my thread back through the same bead many, many times, it will all fit in there. So that's nice so I don't get stuck anywhere. But just going around and doing my top loop again here. Again, reference the photos and the pattern that I will link on my Pinterest, and then Preciosa pattern that I was referencing as well. I didn't do everything identical to that, and I didn't do everything completely identical to my own necklace either, because my necklace, the flounces at the bottom, like the curved scallop flounces, are done by turning beads on head pins, and my hands were really hurting turning head pins on this day. It's not like they were heavy-duty head pins or anything. I don't know what the problem was. So I beaded those on string as opposed to turning all the flounces, just to save my hands, honestly, because I need them. I can't have them in pain. But just feeding my seed beads through the top there, and I have finished my final motif. I just like to put it on top to make sure I haven't, if it's a little bit longer, then I know I added an extra row somewhere, and then I have to get sad, you know? Luckily I didn't finish any of these and realize they were wrong. I got pretty close a couple of times, but I made sure to triple check everything before I tied off my threads, just because that would be extra annoying. But do I want to make one of these in like a bronzy copper color? Yes. Do I want one in a dark blood red color glass? Of course. There is a finish of Czech glass that's called travertine or Picasso finish, and that's like a painterly, dirty in a nice way, antiqued finish on the beads, and I would love to have one of these in like a greeny turquoise with Picasso finish, but I can't find all the correct sizes of beads without buying each size from a different shop, and that would be very irritating. And now that my 5 central large motifs are finished, I need to make 4 little round motifs that go in between each of these when the necklace gets strung together. And to do so, I'm following again the Preciosa pattern for this. I can actually put that little bit of their pattern here on the screen for you so you can see what I am stringing and what I'm doing. They have you string things flat and then loop back on them to create these motifs. I found that worked fine for this, but for the larger motifs, that just confused me. So the larger motifs, I didn't reference their pattern, but for this little rounds, I did. But you string on some of the teardrops with 4 seed beads in between and then go back through like so, hopefully between referencing the pattern and looking at my, I don't know, chubby fingers trying to make it work, you will understand what's going on here. Or like an emerald green color of glass, a topaz yellow color of glass. I basically just want these in every color. There's like a nice sort of lapis Picasso finish, like a lapis blue would be really cool. And of course, I haven't played around with this at all, so using these same techniques and like this necklace as a base to then kind of get creative with would be really fun, but would be kind of time consuming to figure out new like variations on this design. There are so many fun pressed glass bead shapes, like different flowers and like rectangles that look almost kind of Art Deco, or like Egyptian patterned beads that would be really cool to figure out a way to do necklaces like this, but using, instead of just like standard sized beads, using more like interesting shapes of beads. So I wouldn't mind playing around with it sometime in the future. We all know I love sitting here and working with beads. It's not surprising. But you need 4 of these little circles, 1 to go in between each of the 5 of the larger motifs we made for the main portion of the necklace. And again, just tying off my threads and then weaving them back through, even though I'm probably not supposed to. I have to do what my heart tells me, you know? But once I have my 5 large motifs and my 4 smaller circular motifs, I can go ahead and start stringing this necklace together. I'm going to cut a piece of thread that is about 3 times the length of this little layout. So again, probably about a meter or a yard long. And again, I'll thread that with a needle on each end and start by stringing on 16 size 11 seed beads. This is the size I've been using this whole time. I have had people tell me that they have never seen sizes on seed beads before. If you're shopping online, usually they will tell you what the size number is. They'll give you a lot of information on these buddies. But these seed beads are from Supply Emporium, one of my favorite bead shops over on Etsy, and again, we'll have those linked below for you. But I will string each of those needles through the first size 5 on the outside of the upper ring of this buddy over here. Again, study a necklace. I really recommend, especially for this putting everything together part of it. at the end to study a necklace up close. And then you feed your needles through to the other side of this top ring, and then each needle through that same size 5 bead on the other side of the loop. And then each of these gets 8 seed beads. So you use 16 to start. Each of these gets 8 on this side. And then you lock with a size 4 fire polish bead. Then the top thread gets 2 size 4s, the bottom thread gets 1, and then you lock those again with another size 4 to create a little loop up here. And this top row across the necklace gets 2 loops here, so you do the same again, 2 beads on the top thread, 1 bead on the bottom thread, lock through another size 4, and then once again each needle gets 8 size 11 seed beads, and that is the middle motif between these two large teardroppy buddies. Again, feed either needle through the size 5 over here, up through the top of this ring, just feed the needles through till you get to the other side where you can go through the other size 5 over here and start the whole process again. 8 seed beads on each needle, locking with a size 4, top thread gets 2, bottom thread gets 1, lock through a 4, etc., etc. I do hope some of you will attempt this sort of thing. If you have a long weekend perhaps, plenty of time set aside for minor frustrations, it's a good exercise in patience, which we all know I need to learn more of, so perhaps it's good for me. And once I've made it all the way across, I just finished with another ring of 16 beads on the outside edge, just how I had started, and tie off my thread and weave the ends back through, as is my practice. For the next connective row, again, I'm cutting about a yard of thread here, and I'm going to thread on a couple of seed beads and lock at the center between the two sizes of teardrops here on my first motif. Again, I'm going to thread on 8 seed beads. You'll notice we're working in 8s for the most part here in the center, and then 8 on each needle. And then you thread through 4 of the seed beads on the side of one of these rings, like so. And then you feed through the ring to the other side, coming out of the same place on the other side, like mirroring where you were. And again, 8 seed beads, and that is how you connect these center rings to the larger motifs. Going right along here, again, weaving the threads through the centers of the motifs, kind of reinforces them as well, which is sort of nice. If you have a thicker thread, this could get too stiff in here, but luckily this nylon thread that I'm working with is very silky, and so it really has no trouble going through even the seed beads multiple times. And I've gotten myself a little bit tangled here. There we go. Feed through to the other side of this. When you make these little rounds, they're like a donut. There's a hole in the middle, and you can feed a size 4 fire polish bead through to fill in that donut while you are weaving your way through, basically. That's how that's finished off. I did buy about 10 grams of seed beads for this. I think I used probably around 7, so I didn't need the full 10 grams, but I don't mind having extra seed beads laying around. I'll put them to use in some other way, that's for sure. Do let me know if you enjoy seeing these sort of projects, because I could definitely do more in the future. There are a couple other patterns I've seen that I would like to experiment with, once I can get my hands on the correct size of beads, of course, that is. I did see some radium glass, Czech glass beads over on eBay. So it's like, you know, uranium glass, like vintage glassware that like glows under black light because it has a tiny bit of uranium in it. They do have glass beads that are like that. And I don't know how, is it good to have really low levels of uranium around your neck? Probably not, but like I've eaten a lot. Like back in my youth, I ate a lot of microwaved, like, you know, diet quote unquote meals, microwaved in plastic. So I think I'm already kind of screwed. So might as well wear some UV glow uranium glass jewelry as well, just to really cinch it, you know. So I kind of do want to experiment with those beads because they look really fun. And for the last row of connected beads here, we start again with the 16 beads on the outside of the largest bead of the bottom ring here. So I've fed these through the size 6, moved to the inside of the ring, and then I'm going to do the first pass diagonally across the motif here with 13 seed beads. I think the necklace I have uses 15, but I needed one less just because I think my beads were a little bit larger. My seed beads were a little bit larger than the ones that they were using. And then to make the X in the center here, on the other needle I will string on 6 beads, go through the center of the 13 bead strand, the first one, and then string on another 6 and finish off like that. So the first side of the X here, you do 13 beads all at once, and then for the second side you weave through that center bead to create and interlock that X. And then the stringing between the motifs is the same as the top row. It just, instead of having 2 rings in the center, it just has 1. So again, we lock with that size 4, we get 2 beads on the top, 1 bead on the bottom, lock through one more size 4, like so. And I just have to string that same way all the way across the bottom of the necklace here to finish off the main body of the necklace, and then we can get a little bit more decorative with the floops and drops that hang off of the bottom of this necklace. I may have quite a bit of beading coming to you this month, so apologies in advance if you don't like watching me work with sparkly things, because this month might be a little bit heavy on that, but then we will be finishing the rest of the season and the year off with a metric ton of sewing, because I have a lot of projects planned right now, more than I will have time for, so we'll hopefully, some projects I have to know that are going to get cut, but I don't want them to be cut, so I'm trying to pack in as much as I can, but we'll see how it goes. This is why I decided to not start house hunting until January, because I can't cut back on my fall sewing. It's just not possible. There's too many fun ideas to explore here during my favorite season, so I'm just diving into the creativity, and then the practicality of all the mortgagey, adulty things begins in January. Although I do have to start paying on my student loans again, so that's going to be fun. Slowing down my house savings because I have to pay back my loans or something. Boring. But why think about that when you can be stuck in sequins and beads and brocades instead, which is what I like to do here in the fall, and also most of the time in every other season as well. So I did my first 2 floops down here, but then I ran out of thread, so I tied off, and now I'm attaching these little dangles from this set of rings down here in the last row of this. I'm just, again, turning some beads on head pins with a round nose plier to create these little danglies. And you can feed these on with jump rings, which probably is easier, but I just turned these right onto these rings. And I'm using a size 6 bead and then one of the teardrops for these little dangles. Would be cute as earrings to match this. I haven't made earrings to match this yet, but I really should. Because I have a few beads left over, just enough to make some matching earrings perhaps. It's hard to find dark green iris earrings like this, unfortunately. But for these drapes down here, I'm just feeding through different beads, different areas of the larger motifs that make up the main part of the necklace. You can see this is where different makers kind of finish off these necklaces in different ways. So if you're studying different necklaces, you'll notice the flourishes here at the bottom do change from necklace to necklace, just because different people prefer doing it different ways. And I preferred to string them just because, again, all this turning over here with the pliers was hurting my hands. And so for these straight hanging, fringy drops that come down from the necklace, I did stick with the head pin turned bead chain kind of thing that you make out of, chain you make out of beads, really. Which is how the drapes are done on my original necklace as well, but again, it was hurting my hands, so I didn't bother. Just doing these 3 long fringy bits was enough for me. But for all these flourishes along the bottom of the necklace here, it's all about kind of gradating from small to large beads. Of course, you don't have to do it that way. You could do all the same size of beads. You could do different patterns of beads down here, and you'll get a slightly different result, and the necklace will be uniquely yours if you're making one of these. So this is the part where you can really get quite playful. I'm sticking pretty close to the pattern, but again, I am kind of changing a few things just to ease up on my hands, honestly. And And then for the ends of these, where the clasps need to go in the back, I am going to use lobster claw clasps, which is what my original necklace uses and what many of these seem to use. But I'm going to create a beaded chain similar to those drops. And once again, I suggest you look at the close-up photos if you want to copy what I'm doing exactly, because it is just quite impossible to explain. Unfortunately, I added an extra loop of seed beads at this end where I'm adding the lobster claws. I wanted the lobster claws to face up. I thought that would be useful, but I am connecting those using some antique brass head pins and jump rings like so. Once again, I was trying to string. That's the reason I added an extra loop over there, is because turning these, if I could turn 2 less beads, it was good because it was hurting my hand. And this side I have to turn a bunch. So I'm turning several size 4s and finishing with teardrops over here to make a little beaded chain. Instead of turning these and connecting each little like turned charm to itself, I'm using a jump ring to connect them. Once again, this will hopefully make sense once you see what I mean. And having this length of beaded chain on the ends of this side means that this necklace is a bit adjustable. So if it's feeling too tight on my neck, if I'm wearing it high up as a choker, I can have it be tight, or I can loosen it, or I can even wear it down further onto my neck if I want to, just by having these on the longest length, giving me a bit of versatility with this necklace, just depending on where I fasten the back. But finishing off the closures here in the back is actually my last step for this necklace. Once again, I would like to make more of these, even though it's very time consuming. It ate up more time than I thought it would. I was hoping this would take me 1 day, and it took me like 2.5 days again. So that's where some of my time last week disappeared to, was trying to get this buddy together. But I am very, very pleased with the results, so it was worth the pain of turning all these beads, and I hope you also enjoyed watching this necklace come together. The trouble is I don't have a lot of necklines low enough to show these things off. Of course in evening wear perhaps, but I'm not sitting here in my evening wear down here in the studio today, sadly enough, so I just threw on a quick cowl neck so you can get an idea of what this looks like. Of course I need a nice open sort of corset-y top, which we may be getting to in the future, who knows. But here is my finished sparkling iridescent green version of this style. Like I said, this is not an original design of mine. This is something that's been floating around on the internet in different iterations for many, many years now. So hopefully that means this is rather an accessible pattern, if not necessarily an easy project to put together, because again, the patience required and the dexterity, hand-eye coordination, and mental focus, it requires quite a lot of those. But seeing as I am generally a little bit scattered, distracted, and sleep deprived, if I could do it, then you probably can too. In any case, I hope you enjoyed seeing how I put this necklace together today, and thank you as always for watching. I'll be back with more sewing, vintage fashion, costuming, and crafting real soon, so I'll see you then. Bye.